My husband didn't know I spoke German. That's why he felt safe, planning his backup life, while I was sitting just 3 feet away. And that mistake? It cost him everything. What happens when the person you trust most is planning your downfall right in front of you? My name is Olivia. I'm 38 years old, and I spent 11 years building a life with a man who was quietly looking for the exit. We were sitting in a high-rise office, all glass and cold steel, meeting a German investor for a luxury condo deal. Ryan had orchestrated the whole thing. I was there for support. I sat there, sipping my water, playing the part of the quiet wife, while Ryan leaned over and told the investor in German that I was a harmless decoration. And every word I learned brought me closer to a truth I wasn't ready for. He said I was too naive to understand the numbers. He said putting the deed in his name only was a safety measure for when he finally restructured his life. Imagine watching the man you've shared a home and a future with dismantle your entire existence, while he thinks you're just admiring the view. But he had no idea the game was about to change. See, the year ago, I caught him on a late-night call. I heard a few German words, and I felt a distance between us I couldn't explain. I didn't learn the language to catch him. I learned it because I wanted to surprise him. I wanted to, finally, be part of his world. For months, I told him I was spending extra time at the gym. But really, I was in my car, with headphones on, immersed in language lessons. I'd hear him talk about moving assets and timing the break. At first, I didn't want to believe it. But the numbers don't lie, and neither does a man when he thinks he's invisible. By the time we sat in that office, I didn't just understand the words. I understood the betrayal. Every time he patted my hand, I felt a wave of nausea. He was so proud of himself. He believed he was playing for chess, while I was just a piece on the board. He was about to find out I was the one playing for keeps. I watched him lie about our shared finances. I watched him manipulate the investor into thinking I was a liability. And I didn't say a single word. I needed him to feel absolutely, dangerously confident. The silence in that room was heavy, and he had no idea I was about to break it. The meeting ended with Ryan practically glowing. He felt like he had just pulled off the heist of the century. The investor walked us toward the elevator, still chatting with Ryan about market trends. The three of us stepped into that small, mirrored box. The doors slid shut, and for a second, the only sound was the hum of the cable. Ryan caught my eye in the mirror and gave me a condescending wink, as if I were a child who had just behaved well at dinner. That was the moment I stopped being the decoration, and the moment his world started to burn. I didn't hesitate. I looked directly at the investor, and in my most polished, academic German, I thanked him for the transparency. I told him it was refreshing to hear the true plan for the deed's restructuring. The investor froze mid-sentence. Ryan's hand, which was resting on my shoulder, went completely limp. It was like the air had been sucked out of that elevator, and for the first time in 11 years, I was the one in control. I then turned to my husband, my voice as steady as the floor beneath us, and I reminded him in German that in our state, any asset purchased during a marriage is joint property, no matter whose name he tried to put on that paperwork. I told him I'd be providing my attorney with a translated account of every word spoken in that room. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Ryan's face turned a ghostly, sickly gray. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, he actually saw me. He saw the woman who had spent a year learning his secrets, while he thought she was just hitting the treadmill. The investor looked at his shoes, suddenly desperate to be anywhere else, while the power in that elevator shifted so fast it made my head spin. Ryan couldn't even breathe, let alone defend himself. I smiled, stepped out when the doors opened, and told him we should probably call our lawyers. The ride home was a war zone of silence. I counted every lie. I memorized every excuse. I was building my case. He tried to claim I was spying. He tried to claim he was protecting our future. But every time he opened his mouth, I just looked out the window. The man I loved was gone. In his place was a stranger who had finally been caught. When we got home, he told me I wouldn't last a month in a financial dispute without his guidance. He said I was emotional. I saved my emotions for the shower. I let the hot water hide the shaking for exactly 10 minutes. Then, I dried my eyes, and I got to work. I didn't rush the divorce. I played it cold. I waited until the ink on that luxury condo purchase was officially recorded. See, once that deal was finalized, the law didn't care about the restructuring he whispered about in German. It was legally half mine, and that was the key to my freedom. While Ryan was busy looking for loopholes, I was reviewing the life he never knew I had. For years, I'd been quietly building my own investments. I was studying the market. I was playing a much larger game, while he was still trying to win a small fight. The divorce was a bloodbath for him, and I watched him realize, too late, exactly what he'd lost. He realized he couldn't afford to buy me out of our marital home and keep the luxury condo he had pinned all his hopes on. Our marital home was sold as part of the settlement. I watched him haul his suitcases out of our old house one last time, into a rental unit he hated. The predator had officially become the prey. I used my share of that home sale, plus my own secret savings, to buy him out of the condo completely. On the day of the final signing, he sat across from me in the lawyer's office, looking tired, looking small. Before we signed the final papers, I opened my laptop, and I showed him the numbers. He assumed I was too simple to understand. The shock on his face told me everything. He realized then that I hadn't just caught him. I had outpaced him years ago. Then, I signed those transfer papers. In German, I looked him in the eye and told him, restructuring, complete. He walked out of that office with nothing but his pride in tatters. And now, I sat on my new balcony, looking at the city skyline. The silence in this condo wasn't lonely. It was the sound of a woman who finally heard herself think. I didn't need to shout to win. I had only needed to pay attention. Ryan believed he was the architect of our lives. But it turns out I was the one holding the plans. He prepared for if things ever changed. Well, things changed. And for the first time, I'm the one moving forward.